Savior, He loves me too. Yes, He loves me too. I need His Savior in everything I do. Good morning. Certainly, these are a blessing to once again be assembled here in the house of the Lord with another opportunity to study this portion of His holy and divine word. And as always, is indeed our prayer that something is said this morning that you find to be beneficial and thereby be applied to your life and be a better Christian and a better person in the future. Certainly, God is continuing to be good to us and bless us, and we are certainly thankful to Him for all that He do. And we certainly want to remember those of our number that are sick and shut in. Go by, and if the opportunity presents itself where you can go by and visit with them, I'm sure they'd be happy to hear the words of encouragement that you may have. And then if there's any brothers, excuse me for a minute, what is it, Miriam? What is it? What she's talking about. But anyway, certainly if, we want to remember those of our number also that are mourning the loss of their loved ones, continue to pray for them in our prayers and remember them in our prayers as well. So now we're starting another lesson, another quarter, and the subject of our lesson, that we'll be studying this quarter, we'll be looking at the goal statement, or the goal statement of Jesus. And when I was looking at this lesson, I thought about this lesson, and I just throw this in. I don't know if some of you have been around as long as I have and remember this, but at one time that was, Shreveport had a slogan, said that a city on the go. Y'all may not remember that. And then, so we know we are to do what? Let's go into all the world, right? Lesson 1 is found in Mark, the 16th chapter, verses 15 and 16. Today's lesson's objective is to better understand why we should go. So we hope we can figure that out, why we should go, what purpose it will serve, and who will benefit. All right? Why we should go, what purpose it will serve, and who will it benefit. And he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creations. Mark 16 and 15. God has always called people to go. We find it in which Kevin has talked extensively about in Genesis, the 12th chapter, where Abram was commanded to do what? To go forth from his country. And then Moses in Exodus, the 3rd chapter, verses 10, was to go free my people. The Israelite was told in Exodus, the 14th chapter, verses 15, tell the sons of Israel to go forward. Joshua, in Joshua 3 and 4, he told, go into the land that I have promised you. And so we see that God has always called people to go. So what happens when people are on the go? What happens when people are on the go? Well, I'll help you. One of the things they do is they learn. If you watch a small child, right? A small child is always what? Moving, right? They're moving, looking around, they're what? Investigating, they're searching. And so they're doing that because they're learning, right? So people that are on the go are people that are learning. Also, people on the go are growing. So two things come out of going is we learn and we grow. So that's some of the reasons why we want to do what? We want to be on the move. God always had us on the move, wanted people on the move. Why? God is getting you in position for something great. God is just not telling us to move. to be moving, but God has plans in God for us, and he knows in order for us to be successful, in order for him to do certain things with us, he has to get us in position. And to do that, we must do what? We must go. We can't accomplish anything. Now it's interesting, if you will, from the perspective of that we need to go, because one of the things we want to do and one of the things we try to do is what? Say again? Stay put, right? We look for what? We're looking to do what? What we think of settling down, relaxing. You know, I remember, I just shared this with you. We was out the other day playing a little golf with some of my buddies, and we got up on a shade tree. We had to wait a few minutes, and the wind was blowing. It was nice and cool up on that shade tree because it was hot. And I got to thinking to myself, boy, it would be nice if I had me a nice sandwich and a pitcher of lemonade. I could just sit here the rest of the day. But I need to move. You got to move, right? We find that, now I'll show you something else, and we don't really get into it a whole lot, but I want to share this because we studied this lesson before. We know of another guy that God told to go, and he didn't want to go where God told him to go. It was Jonah. Y'all remember that? Yeah. Remember the story of Jonah? Now, if you look at Jonah, prior to God telling him to do that, Jonah, you would say Jonah's a good guy. Jonah is obedient. He's doing everything love, but Jonah had some problems that wasn't visibly seen. In order for God to fix those problems, God needed him to go, right? Also, there were some people who needed for his help, right? That needed God's help. So God was sending him for things. So in order to make something great happen, God needed to do what? He needed to get Jonah in the right position. And so that's what God is wanting to do with us. He's needing us to go because he's trying to get us in the right position to do some great things. And if we would just go, God has commanded us, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, then we will make some great things happen. All right. When Jesus left this earth, his last words were crucial. Let's look at his last words. Somebody want to read that, 16, 15, and 16? Mark. All right. So Jesus said, now, generally, excuse me, generally, when someone says something to you and those are the last words they say to you, then they wear some what? Generally, they have some significance. And so Jesus has said something here that should be of significance to us. And so there's some things that we can glean from these two scriptures. First of all, he says to do what? To go, right? To go where? Into all the world to do what? Preach the gospel, right? And then he said, and to preach the gospel to whom? All creation. And then he says to us, he that believeth, what? And is baptized shall be saved, right? And then he said, but he that believeth not or disbelieveth shall be condemned. So it has a purpose there, right? Our going has a purpose. The book of Acts speaks of miraculous growth of the early church. Peter preached Jesus in Acts, the 2nd chapter. They preached Jesus in Acts, 3rd chapter, in verses 26. The apostles were arrested for preaching Jesus in Acts, the 4th chapter. Now, during this time, if you go back to our study that we did just really, you see that the church was growing by leaps and bounds as they was doing these things, right? Peter preached Jesus to the rulers even while he was under arrest in Acts the 4th chapter and verses 8. They all were rebuked for preaching in Acts the 5th chapter, verses 26. They did not stop preaching Jesus, we see in Acts the 5th chapter, verses 42. Stephen was accused of preaching Jesus in Acts the 6th chapter, and verses 14. And Stephen preached Jesus as he was being killed for it in Acts the 7th. And then Philip met the eunuch, and he preached to Jesus in Acts the 8th chapter. And so we see here that that they were doing what? They was heeding to what God had or what Jesus had commanded them to do, and that was to what? To go, right? And they not only was going, but they was going and they was preaching the word. And as a result of them doing that, God was putting them in position to do some things, and some great things we see here was happening. Now, the question we had to ask ourselves, why is it now that we don't go? What has hindered us or what has stopped us from going? Gary, we're not on the persecution. That could be one reason. But now remember now, when they started in Acts, they wasn't under persecution. They was doing a lot. Now, the persecution made them leave Jerusalem and go out throughout the world. But initially, they were in Jerusalem and they were preaching the gospel, and they were preaching it all the time for every reason. Go ahead. Maybe we don't have the same love and dedication as those people had back during those times. Now, sister, we don't want to leave our comfort, right? It's so easy to get comfortable, right? It's so easy to get things set up just as we want it. And once we get things set up just as we want, we then tend to do what? We don't want to move, right? When we get, let's think about it for a minute. Let's take just a few minutes to think about it. You know, when we get settled in, and I don't know about you, but one of the things that I have always dreaded, and I've done it a few times, and I don't want to do it again, is that I don't want to have to move. You know, I got my house, I get stuff set in place, and then I begin to acquire all that stuff and all this stuff, and we get it. And one of the things you find out when you get ready to move, if you're moving from one house to another, you start asking yourself, where did I get all this stuff from? And then you started doing what? You want to throw away a lot of stuff. And then you throw away a lot of stuff, and then when you get to the other place, you say, where is this? Because you remember you need it. But we get comfortable in our surroundings. We get comfortable with what we have, and we find that we don't want to what? We don't want to move. In fact, I know I love to travel, okay? And we do some traveling. But something I found out by myself, even when I was working and I was in business, something about traveling that I love to go places. But after I'm there 2 or 3 days, guess what I want to do? I want to go home. Why? Because it's something about sleeping in my own bed, sleeping at my own house, eating my own food. It's just something better about that, right? So it goes against, or it fights. So my needing to go is being what? There's other things or other factors are fighting against that. So we always have the urge embedded in us to do what? To sit. Right? And so we see here that, as we said earlier, that to go was a what? A command. Right? Now, we realize that, yes, ma'am. Well, certainly one of the reasons, and we'll get more into that a little bit, that hinders us from going is the fact that some of us have a fear of rejection, right? But you know, when you excited about something, right? When you're excited, nothing deters you. You don't worry about other things. You don't worry about, in fact, and you're so right, sister, but when we first obeyed the gospel, we didn't care about what other people. We couldn't understand, we couldn't see in the world how other folks would want to accept what we had to offer, right? Or what Jesus was offering. And so we was what? We were thrilled to go out and share the hope of Jesus. We couldn't wait to do that. All right. We don't always appreciate the gift that it is.
Rejection is not the issue. The issue is that we know it fails. So we have to change So rejection comes with it. But on the same hand, you're talking about being excited about something. If I'm a Cowboy fan or Saints fan, if I'm talking to you about the Saints, I don't care if you don't like the Saints or not. I'm talking about my Saints. And you're going to probably not like them because you're a Cowboy fan. I mean, that don't stop me from telling you
That's right.
about my Saints.
That's right.
So, I mean, the same way with the gospel, we have to eliminate this thing about rejection, and we have to embrace it and understand that rejection comes with it. That's what's going to happen.
We just accept that there's something wrong with Cowboy fans. But anyway, I didn't have to throw that in there. You know, the Cowboy fans are all right. But he makes a point. But let's go back to what Richard read to us earlier. It tells us, and Jesus already tells us in verses 16, he says there was going to be some that did what? Not believe. So he's not concerned, but he didn't say because there's some that not going to believe, don't go. He says you go and you tell. And he says those that believe, he says you baptize them. He says, and those that disbelieve, I handle that. So he already told them there was going to be some that wasn't going to believe. So the command is for us to go, right? The other reason why we want to go is because, or we should ask ourselves, so to go where? So as you're going, wherever you go, right? To our families, to our friends, right? We should do what? We should be teaching. Now, I need to say that too. I wanted to throw that in there because I just said it right there. I want you to get it. I know that he used the term preach. And so we look at that and we say, well, you know, if you want to really be really technical about it, you say, well, I'm not a preacher. So so he wasn't really talking to me because I don't preach, right? But we all do what? We all teach, right? And teaching is a what? Is a derivative of what? Preaching. And so we all can teach someone. So in essence, he's asking us to go, and we all have opportunities to teach. You don't have to have 30 minutes or an hour to teach. We can teach some real important lessons. In fact, some of the best lessons we learn are very short and straight to the point. We get that. We move on. Again, remember now, thinking of how we did or how we do it, how a little child does. A little child is going around all the time. They're never sitting. A child, when they're small, they're never sitting still. They're going out, they're investigating, and they're learning. And they're learning things quick, right? They're committing those things. So we are to go, and we are to go, and we're to, in our communities, in our churches, in our neighborhoods, and around our cities. We ought to do what? Teach. So we ought to be teaching what? All the time. Right? Unless y'all want to go somewhere else. I mean, you can go to Europe if you want to. You can go to Africa. You can go to all the places. I'm not saying you shouldn't go there, but again, we shouldn't use those places as a reason for us to do what? Not to teach. Right? We say, well, if I ever get over there, then I teach. He didn't say you have to wait till we can be teaching all the time, right? And let's, yes, ma'am. Our actions teach us a lot and says a lot about us. Not only that, but it says a lot about what and who we believe in, right? So our action says a lot about what we believe and who we believe in. So who's the scope? In other words, where? I mean, because again, and I may got a little bit ahead of myself there, but he says we will go to all creations, okay? That means that we're supposed to teach who? Everybody. Everybody. Not just look, oftentimes we're willing to do that, but we do what? We're selective in how we do it, right? We just won't go everywhere. In fact, I share this again, like I told you, we like to travel, and so when we travel, Marion has certain places, in certain places she's going to stay. And there's some places she ain't going to stay there. There's no sense of me looking at that. There's no sense of me considering the prices because she ain't staying there. Same way with eating, right? There are certain places that we'll go, and there's some places we ain't gonna go to eat. And then it gets even, and I'm sharing these things, but even get deeper than that. There are some seats in the restaurant that we ain't gonna sit in. I don't want to sit right next to the kitchen, and I don't want to sit right next to the bathroom. So if you got those two places, you could take me to those seats. You might as well get ready for me to move because I'm not sitting there. And those are just my choices, right? So we get real specifically and particular about what we do. The reason I'm sharing that with you is we get that way about also where we teach and who we teach and when. We only teach certain people. Generally, those people are people that what? Look like us, right? They look like us, right? They people that we what? We're comfortable around. But did he say go look for comfort? Y'all getting quiet now. He said go and teach what? All creation, right? That means we was to teach everybody. We're to look for opportunities everywhere with everybody. Why? Because everybody needs Jesus. Right? Brother Gordon. Okay.
But they obey the gospel. And so what I'm saying is that sometimes we discount people because, well, we're in this place or we're at that place and they won't listen to me or they don't have anything. You don't know exactly how you can affect somebody's life until you say something.
That's right. Exactly. And not only that, but oftentimes, to show you how we are, and it may be, some of this stuff may be just shutting off myself, it may not be you. But sometimes we're not comfortable around people who don't talk like us. Right? They don't talk like us, and so we're disinterested. And so we say, and it's almost as if we just say, leave it to someone else. But guess what? That's another opportunity for us to learn and to grow. Because just like other folks can learn our language, we can also do what? Learn other folks' language, right? And learning their language is an opportunity for us to do what? Again, like we said earlier, to learn and grow. That's what again, that's what the command does. Now, if you're not learning and you're not growing, then what's happening? You started out. If you think that's not true, you just take any time, any parts of your body, and you just stop using it for a period of time, and see what happens. That's why you notice sometimes if you sit there and you simply cross your legs, and you stay in that position for an hour or two, and then you go to move that leg, what happens? You say, your leg say, you ain't been moving. You ain't been doing nothing, right? And so oftentimes, that's what we do. Our mind will tell us something different. In other words, I was sitting and I'm trying to think of the situation right now, and I'll move on, but our mind tell us that we can still do some things that we did when we were young. And so you look at it and you say you can do it. But when you go to do it, your body reminds you, right? I don't know what you're trying to do, but you ain't been doing that. And since you ain't been doing that, we ain't finna start that now. Huh? And that's kind of the way we get with the gospel, right? We started out, as Sister Snow said, we started out preaching, we started out going, and then all of a sudden, for some reason or other, we stopped. And some of us have stopped for so long that now our mind says, What you mean? I hear Vince saying go. I hear Brother Kevin saying go. I hear Henry saying go, but you know, you ain't winning so long. So it gets a little bit challenging to get what? To get started. In fact, that goes back to the laws of physics. We talked about that before. An object that's in motion tends to do what? And an object that's at rest tends to do what? Stay at rest. So God wants us to be a people on the move. He wants us in motion. So we should be moving and not resting. All right. Jesus practiced what he preached. He taught the Jews, which was his people, but he also taught Samaritans. He also taught prostitutes. He also taught lepers. He also taught tax collectors. Who are these people? These are people that many in that day and time would have did what? Frowned upon. All but the Jews, they would have, and especially if he was a Jew, these people below there were people that was considered to be hated. Yet Jesus went to those people and he taught them. What about us? But what do we do? What people are we looking for? We spend a lot of our time trying to teach somebody that's already saying that they've already saved. But what about those people that are not saved? What about those people that are not the cream of the crop? They need to be taught too, right? We're getting quiet again, right? That's okay. In fact, the Bible, Jesus teaches us about that. We got certain people who will walk in the building, right? And they come in the building in certain ways, and we bring them, and we want to bring them all the way up to the front seat. But then there's some other individual who come in, we say, what? You sit back here. Right? Because we have our picks and chooses. In fact, I love the author makes a statement in our lesson. If you read your lesson, he makes a statement. He says the Jesus of that day would not be accepted in many of the churches that we worship in today. Because Jesus came in bloody and with dirty feet. Y'all getting quiet now. Yes, ma'am. We don't want to hurt their feelings. And not only that, but because of our relationship with them, we don't want to lose that relationship with them. And so that relationship, so oftentimes we value that relationship as much or more than our relationship with Jesus, right? And so that's some of it too, right? But now what I like is cripples. He talked to cripples, people who was not doing. But what I like is this next one. I like Jesus dealt with messy people. Now she said like me. I can be messy, that's true. But Jesus he dealt with messy people. And in fact, if we're honest, we deal with a lot of messy people all the time. And if we're honest with ourselves, in a lot of ways, in some ways, I shouldn't say in a lot of ways, but in some ways, we are messy. Right? We are messy. And Jesus accepted us. And he's working with us. He's trying to help us clean up the mess in our lives. And so if Jesus is doing that for us, why are we not willing to help others clean up the mess in their lives? In fact, some of the people that Jesus was able to do the most for, and that was the most dedicated him, was the messy people. It was the messy folks. Most of the folks he dealt with, he had some really messy people. A lot of the disciples and apostles, they were some really messy people. You know, you might have not wanted to talk with Peter because Peter had a pretty good mouth on him, right? And so sometimes we don't want to be around people that don't talk. But those people need Jesus too. Amen. And the thing about it is when Jesus entered their lives, guess what? He can change the way they talk. See, that's what Jesus does. But again, I want you to, something we said earlier, I want you to, God is always working to get us in position. The problem is oftentimes God works, and if he's able to get us in position, first to get us in position, we got to do what? We got to be willing to move. And then when he gets us in that position, then he expects us to do what? To act. But he can do all that work, make all that effort to get us in the right position at the right time, and then many of us sit there and we fail to do what? We fail to act. I give you another, if I can give you a good example of this in my own way. Some of you can appreciate it, some of you you may not. But if you play golf, you have to do a lot of things, or you're doing a lot of things, and some people get really good at it. But you hit the shot, and you can hit a great shot and put the ball in a great position. But if you don't make the putt, it really didn't matter. You might as well not hit the shot because you didn't make the putt, right? And that's kind of how it is. And so when we're watching golf on television, or we're watching it, and the person misses the putt, Marion gets all upset. Why did they miss that putt? Well, it wasn't because they wasn't trying, but they failed to execute. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is that's what happens to us oftentimes. It ain't that we don't know how. It ain't sometimes that we're not trying, but because of our unwillingness to execute, we don't make it happen. And that's what God is asking us. That's what God is trying to get us to do. He's trying to get us to not only to go, but to execute. And so you say, Brother Brown, what's the execute? It's for us to teach. So it ain't enough just to go, but we have to be willing to execute or willing to teach. And that's what we have to do. And then guess what? Here's the beauty of it. God is saying to us, if you just do that part, I got the rest. I'll take it from there. You don't have to do rest. You don't have to worry. I heard a couple of times said this morning, we talk about the rejection. God is saying, I ain't got, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. That ain't your part. Your part is just to go and to teach. And here's something that we need to think and keep in mind to remember now. That's exactly what happened to us. Somebody saw us, they came to us, they taught us, and we took action. God opened our, that's why Paul said, I love how Paul said, he said, but thanks be to God that we obeyed from the heart. It wasn't nothing special about us, but what God did is apparently he opened our minds and our hearts so that when we heard the word, we received it and we obeyed. Some will hear the word and they won't receive it. They won't obey it. But that ain't your part. That's God's part. Your part is to teach. The results, salvation. So who benefits from all this teaching? Those that believe. Those that obey. Those that believe. And guess what? We benefit from it as well. Ain't that something? So we benefited because, again, when we meet different people, we learn different things. We learn different ways to talk. We learn different ways to approach people. And so we grow. And not only that, but we learn to get better at what we're teaching. We learn more about Jesus, and we learn more about how to talk. We learn more about the scriptures. And so we're benefiting, and those that obey, they are benefiting. Amen. And then at the end of the day, we both receive what? Salvation. So it couldn't be any better than that, right? Amen. That's what the results is. And so the gospel saves us. Romans 1:16, we all know that. Paul says what? It's the power of salvation. We know that's what the gospel is. It's the power of salvation. In fact, Paul says what there? He says, I'm not ashamed. And so we shouldn't be ashamed of the gospel, right? And I want to dig a little bit deeper into that to say this. We should not be ashamed to share with others what happened with us. Amen. That's all teaching is. If I don't teach anybody anything, if I can't teach anything else, I ought to be able to teach them what happened to me. I ought to be able to tell them about how Jesus would change my life, right? That's all we're trying to do. And so we shouldn't be ashamed of that. So it shouldn't matter about whether others receive or not. They may not believe it. It doesn't matter. But we should do what? We know it. We believe it. And so we ought to tell it. That's all he's saying. And I like to also bring this out. The act of faith includes baptism. So I wanted to share this part because, and I like the author brought it out, because we find that there's people that now going out and they're teaching and they're saying all you have to do is confess and that's it. But that's not what Jesus said. He said he that believe it, the faith, right? Take some actions, and that action is what? To baptize. Okay? Now, here again, here's a problem people have and they don't seem to understand. Okay? There were folks that would teach you that, well, baptism is not important because it's just an outward showing. Well, they don't understand God. And they don't accept God for who God is. Because I don't know what goes on under the water. I don't know what happens in that water. But I do know that the Bible says that God says there's an operation taking place. And I know who's doing the operating. Amen. That's God. So whatever he's doing it, and it's his business, and he knows what he's doing. My problem is to do, my only job I got is doing what? Believing it and obeying it. Let me say that one more time. I don't know if y'all get that or anything. I got to say that one. My job is to believe and obey. God is doing whatever he does, doing the operation. Now, I'm going to tell you something else while I'm talking about that operation. I may ask the doctor a few questions, and they may tell me a few things, but guess what? I don't get to see what's going on. I don't know what those folks are doing. I just have trusted them to do what they're supposed to do when they put me under. And I'm trusting them to bring me back. And I don't want to be worse than what I was before I went under. And so now think about that. We're putting a lot of faith in a man. Let me go one step further for you. You know, I tell y'all too much about myself. I got to go one more step further. There was a lump that came up on my neck. And I didn't know what that lump was. And Miriam says, you need to go see the doctor. And she knew this doctor. I had never met this doctor before. Amen. Now, this has been many years ago. I had never met this guy. I met him one week. He said, how did you do that? I don't know. What is that? I don't know. So he did a biopsy. He took something, stuck it in, he did a little biopsy. He says it's not cancerous. He said, but we need to take it out. Okay? What I do know is I met this man one time. The second time I met him, he cut my throat. And I paid him a large sum of money. I don't know if y'all getting that or not. I met this man one time. I seen him the second time. He cut my throat. And I paid him a large sum of money. Now, do you don't think that was some faith and some belief? Huh? But now we get to the gospel. I don't know if y'all with me or not. Huh? And we expect much more, even though we see what God has done for us in our lives. And what he's done for us time and time again, some reason or other, we're expecting much more. And we have little faith in to go in and let him do the operation. Miriam? And it also tells us that baptism saves us. It saves us, right? That's right. But to be saved, you have to be what? You have to have operation, right? And I'm saying to us, we want to be saved, right? But we don't want the operation. Amen. That's the point I'm trying to get y'all to see. You see, I wanted the man to take the lump out, and the man said, but it requires operation. And guess what I did? I had the operation because he said it. But yet, when it comes to the Lord, I said, all I want to do is just believe. Why didn't I tell him, well, let me just believe? Are y'all with me now? You see, I should have been able to just believe. I believe it's going to go away. How long y'all think that'll last? Now, and I'm gonna put another thing to you now. Let me say one other thing. I'm gonna leave it alone. Now, at the time that he did this, he determined that it wasn't cancerous, but it could turn cancerous. It's the reason why we need to take it out. And so that's what I see. Take it out. Right? Now, I want to share you and pay them to do it, right? You're right. Now, the reason I want y'all to get this because I want y'all to catch the connection here. You see, sin is like a cancer, right? And it needs to be. Take it out. And in order to take it out, we have to have an operation, Anthony. Amen. All right. Y'all getting it now, right? We got to have an operation, right? Amen. And God is saying he's going to do the operation. But yet somehow or another, we want the sin out without the operation. God does the saving. That's what we were saying about the operation. God is doing the operating here. He's the one doing all this. He's taking care of it. I'm not worried about it. And see, let me share some of this while I'm on this. It's not in the lesson, but let me share some of this. We also sometimes get too worried about one another and about trying to cover up and hide the sin that may have occurred in our life. We shouldn't be worried about one another. We shouldn't. Why am I trying to hide? God is the one that sees. God knows. And guess what? God is the only somebody that can take it out. You can't do nothing about the sin in my life. You can talk about it. You can act a certain way. But guess what? It's my sin, and ain't nothing you can do about it until I go to God and get God to do what? Take it out. Now, here's the thing I like about that. When God takes it out, he forgets about it. God can take it out, and you ain't going to never forget about it. You're going to be talking about it from now. Now, some of you going to be talking about that lump I told you all about from now. You know Brown had a lump. Y'all ain't going to forget about that, right? Y'all going to say, well, you know you had a lump one time. Right? That's the way we are about each other with sin, right? But God takes it out, and he forgets about it. Amen. That's why we need to let God do it. And then when we become God people, we'll become just like God. We'll be able to forget about it too. We must never allow distractions to cause us to forget the message. To cause us to forget the message. What are some distractions that causes us to forget the message? Job. Everyday life. Well, let me ask you this. What is the message? The message is about Jesus, right?
Sometimes we get into conversations. We get into conversations about instrumental music. We get into conversations about Lord's Supper. We got to get back to the cross. If I get you to the cross, we'll take care of the rest of it. I'll get you to understand how we sin. I'll get you to understand why we take the Lord's Supper. But I got to get you to the cross first. I got to get you to Jesus first. And you've been saying it the whole time. Got to get to Jesus.
Got to get to it.
Got to get to Jesus. Once you get to Jesus, then you get to the rest of it. What we want to do is we want to go in and I want to indict you.
Right.
What you're doing wrong. I can do that all day. I can break you down. The thing is, I got to get you to the cross. I got to get you to think about what Jesus has done for you. Get you to understand what sin is. Get you to understand how you live your life. Then once I do that, then once I disciple you, once I get you in the water, and then after that I can talk about some other things. But what we want to do is we want to talk about everything else except the cross.
So a great example of that, and Jesus gives us an example of that, is in the 3rd chapter of John when he's talking to Nicodemus. And remember, Nicodemus was a what? Highly respected religious man, right? And Nicodemus wanted some answers. But what was the first thing Jesus told him? Except you be born again. You can't even see it, Nicodemus. Why am I sitting there trying to explain to you the kingdom? You can't see it. Unless you're what? Unless you're born again. And so we spend a lot of time trying to show people or the kingdom, and they haven't been born. Jesus couldn't do it. So how are we going to do it? I don't know if y'all get that or not. So what Vince is saying is true, is so true in that our job is to bring them to the cross and let Jesus do his job. We got to bring them to the cross. We got to get them there. Teach them that, right? Now, folks may have other questions, and you can, but you can't get caught up in those other questions. You can answer them. I'm not saying not to answer the question, but don't get so caught up into that's what your whole thing is about, right? We spend all your time trying to convince somebody about these various things when you need to be what? Bring them to Jesus and let him begin to do the work there. Now, Sister said something earlier that I got to go back to because you said one of the things that helps you do that is by your actions. When people see your actions, that causes people to want to what? Investigate. They cause them on to ask questions. They want to know. Now, if you're not doing anything, people don't want to know. If you're just sitting there, nobody want to know what you're doing. They see what you're doing. Nothing. Yes, ma'am. So let me say what you said a little differently. See, I don't want to say that you messed up. I want to say that you should learn and grow, right? And so maybe we don't need to do any explaining, and maybe we don't need to create the expectation, and maybe we don't have to do it. Maybe we need to let people come and maybe let them ask us questions. Hey, I noticed y'all didn't have any instrumental music. Why is that? And now I can tell you. Hey, I noticed y'all didn't do this. Why is that? And I can share with you. But as Vince says, now when I share those things, I don't need to beat people across the head with a club. I just need to say, okay, here's the Bible. See, here's the thing I love about the gospel, and here's the thing I love about it. I love that you're supposed to present it and let them decide. See, I don't want to say this too strongly, but I have a problem when we try to demand people do things, when we try to make people believe things. You believe it, you better believe. I have a problem. Just give me the facts, give me the information, and let me decide. I don't need you to do any of those things. All I need you to just let me decide. That's what he said, right? That's what he said. Go and teach. Who shall believe it, right? In other words, what he's saying is, give me the scriptures. See, I don't need you got to explain it and all this. If you got something that you're doing, give me the scriptures. And let me go look at it, and I'll see it myself. You don't have to explain it to me. I can read. I can understand. If I have another question, I ask you. And if you don't know what the scriptures are, you ought to get somebody and say, let me go and I'll find out and I'll get back. Right. But that's how we learn and we grow. And so then I learn what the scriptures are. When people ask me questions, it makes me do more research. I've had people ask me stuff, and I go and I look. People ask me something, I go and I look, and I learn more. And then guess what? When I learn more, and I learn to do better, I do better. Now, what else could you want from that? That's what we all should do, right? We should all want to be better. And so the class today, if is not to suggest to you that you are not going, but if you're not, then maybe this is a good time to start. Because why? Hopefully we learn from the lesson today, it's a command. From who? From the commander. Right? The commander commanded. What did he say? He that believeth and is baptized, and he believeth not, I take care of it. See, that's the part we got to get up. See, when people ask me stuff, there's some things that we need to let God take care of. Well, what about my mama? I'm going to let God take care of that. I'm not here to talk about your mother. But what I am here to talk about is what the gospel says. And here's what the gospel says. Now, you can go and come to any conclusion you want to come on all that. And then somebody say, yeah, but you need to. No, I ain't got to tell nobody. I don't have to tell. Let me, and I might get in trouble with some of y'all, but let me say this. I do not have a heaven or a hell to put anybody in. And therefore, I'm not sending anybody to heaven or to hell. And if I could send anybody to heaven, it would be me. Now, I don't want to tell you who I send it, but anyway. But the fact of the matter is I can't send anybody anywhere. If I make it, it'd be what? It'll be by the grace of God. And so I'm too busy working on trying to get me there and trying to help. Now, here's the problem. Now, here's the problem. Here's the challenge we have. God is saying that you can't get there by yourself. I got to tell y'all that part. I can't get there by myself. So I got to be trying to help somebody else. If I hope to get in, I got to have somebody coming with me. Right? So I got some work to do. That's why you should be going, because you need to find somebody to what? To go with you. Right? Now, let me help some of you smart people. Don't just find one person and say, I got somebody. Because that one might mess up. You need to have a bunch. You can't take no chances. You got to have a lot of folks. Right? This is too important to take any chances. I think I have a hand over here, Kevin. That is so true what you said. And I love that, what Kevin said there, because most of the time when I teach somebody for the first time and we're speaking for the first time, I ask them, do they accept the Bible as the Word of God? Because everybody don't accept it as the Word of God. So I'm going to be sitting there arguing about this, and they're saying, boy, I don't even believe that. You waste your time arguing about what the Bible says when they say, I don't believe that. I know they went right over some of y'all head right there. Y'all don't get that. How could somebody not believe that, right? In fact, I remember talking, I tell y'all this, I tell y'all too much of myself. I remember talking to my stepfather about the Bible, and he telling me to put that book down. He said, it's a guide. It ain't to be gone by. I said, it's a guide, though. Come on. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. And so what I'm saying to us is that our role and our responsibility is again, is to go. And then it's to what? Tell the message. And as Kevin has talked about, not get wrapped up into who we are and what we are about and what we believe, but in terms of what does the Bible say. And then the other part of it is we ought to pray. We need to pray for those that we're trying to open their hearts and minds so that they may be able to receive. And I'm running out of time here. Let me do one other thing I want to share with you. So, and I gave you one earlier, but I wanted to ask you this question. Can you think of other biblical examples where God called his people to go? Now, I gave you several. I want to see if you thought of any. All right. I see a hand over here. So God has always expected his people to be a people on what? On the move, right? And so we need to be what? Active. We need to be moving. We need to be teaching. We need to be talking about what? The saints, the Cowboys. I knew that would get somebody. We need to be talking about Jesus. And I want to say this, and then I'm going to take my seat and let Vince come here. But sometimes, and I do this for myself too, and I'm saying this to you, and I'm saying that we need to think to ourselves about, out of the whole week, other than Sunday and on Wednesday night, how much conversation do you have with someone about Jesus? Just think about that for a minute. You do all the talking. Think about all the talking you do all week long. And exclude Sunday and Wednesday night. And ask yourself, how much time out of all that time, other than those times, did I say anything to anyone about Jesus? Thank you. I've enjoyed this lesson. Brother Gordon.